Good morning, North America. Good afternoon, Europe. And good evening to everyone watching and joining us from India. This is U.S. Election Watch. I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C. The headlines. Trump is safe after a second assassination attempt. U.S. President Biden says the Secret Service needs more help. The FBI investigates anti-Haitian threats at Springfield, Ohio. The probe comes amid Trump's anti-Haitian rhetoric about Haitians eating pets. GOP Governor Mike DeWine defends Haitian immigrants. Ohio Governor DeWine says they came to Springfield to work. And an NDTV exclusive, an interview with Congressman Bera. He says Indian American voters are critical in this year's elections, which remains too close to call. Our top story, a second potential assassination on Donald Trump's life. Later today, former President Trump is expected to meet with the acting director of the Secret Service after another shooting incident. Trump had been golfing on Sunday when shots were heard. The gunman was about 120 and 150 meters away from Trump. A Secret Service agent spotted an AK-47 style weapon poking out of the bushes in the golf course, about a hole ahead of where Trump was playing. An agent fired and the gunman dropped the rifle and fled in an SUV, leaving the weapon behind. He was apprehended in a nearby county. NDTV's Vishal Vivek has more. All right, we're getting a better picture this morning on the suspect behind the Trump shooting. The suspect, Ryan Routh, has been identified as someone who has been quite vocal about his support for Ukraine and extremely critical of former President Donald Trump. Now, Routh reportedly supported Trump in 2016, but then changed his mind. NDTV's Parmeshwar Bawa has those details.
This 58-year-old former construction worker has reportedly been identified as the man arrested for allegedly pointing an AK-47 at former U.S. President Donald Trump while he was golfing.
In the bushes where this guy was is an AK-47 style rifle with a scope, two backpacks which were hung on the fence that had ceramic tile in them, and a GoPro, which he was going to take pictures of. So those are being processed right now. The Secret Service agent that was on the course did a fantastic job. What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off.
But his history with violence is not new. In 2002, he was arrested for barricading himself inside a building with an automatic weapon. The charges were severe, but the case's resolution remains murky. The New York Times reports that on Signal, Ryan Ruth declared in his profile bio, civilians must change this war and prevent future wars. His WhatsApp bio further stated, each one of us must do our part daily in the smallest steps to support human rights, freedom and democracy. We must aid the Chinese. In 2020, meanwhile, Ryan posted on X about his admiration for Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democratic presidential candidate at the time, praising her ability to work tirelessly on peace deals in Syria, Afghanistan and other conflict areas. Also in a May 2020 post, he invited North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to Hawaii for a vacation and offered to be the ambassador to help settle conflicts between their countries. Ryan's commitment, though, extended beyond online rhetoric. In a 2023 interview with the New York Times, he revealed that he traveled to Ukraine to back the war effort and recruit Afghan soldiers. Republicans and Democrats alike responded to the incident by roundly condemning political violence. Experts argue that given the national epidemic of gun violence in the United States, these kind of attacks are perhaps another inevitable new normal, but for now, it is still shocking. Parmeshwar Bava for NDTV World.
Reacting to the incident, billionaire Elon Musk took to his social media platform X. He questioned why is no one trying to assassinate President Joe Biden and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris. He later deleted the post. Meanwhile, Biden and Harris were briefed on the shooting and each issued a statement condemning political violence. Now, Kamala Harris said she was deeply disturbed by the day's events and, quote, said, "We all must do our part to ensure that this incident does not lead to any more violence," unquote. Now, let's take a closer look at the apparent second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We're joined by Tiffany Watkins Ahan, and Tiffany, who has worked in the White House during the first term of President George W. Bush, along with being a part of the Bush-Cheney re-election campaign. Also with us this morning, Richard Painter, professor at the University of Minnesota Law School and former White House chief ethics lawyer. Tiffany, let me come to you first. Second time in little over 2 months. Second attempt on Donald Trump's life. What concerns you most about this repeat scenario?
Well, what concerns me most is that, the level of violence around this election and around President Trump, former President Trump's life is a bit unsettling. And also, what also concerns me is, how much the Secret Service is actually prepared to handle these types of scenarios and attempts. Look, they seem to be doing a great job, as good a job as they can to make sure that the former president is protected. But I know this is a bit unprecedented, and perhaps they need more resources.
All right, Tiffany, now, Richard, it's really disturbing we're seeing this again. I really want to know what needs to be done. The Palm Beach County Sheriff went on record saying that Trump does not receive the same level of protection that a sitting president does. So if this were Joe Biden, the security protocol would have been very different. The entire golf course we're hearing would have been covered. Given what we've seen twice now and that we're in such a polarizing election cycle, what do you think should change with regards to Trump's security detail?
I believe the security should be substantially increased for former President Trump and also for Vice President Harris. We simply cannot tolerate violence, political violence, in a democracy. The United States is the second largest democracy in the world after India. Both countries have experienced in their history political violence. The United States went through a period in the 1960s where President Kennedy and his brother Bobby Kennedy were killed, and Bobby Kennedy was killed when he was a candidate about to win the Democratic nomination in 1968. We also had the assassination of Martin Luther King. We had attempts on the lives of Gerald Ford, President Ronald Reagan, and that former President Trump. This cannot be tolerated. We need to increase the security, the Secret Service protection of former President Trump, Vice President Harris, we have to have elections decided at the ballot box, not with an AK-47.
Tiffany, what do you think? Is it as simple as getting the Secret Service to up the security detail? Because there are always complaints about how there's limited staffing, and this is not as easy as it may sound.
Yeah, I think for the Secret Service, there's a couple things that I know the request for upping staffing seems like a logical one, but they need they probably need additional funding from Congress to make sure that occurs. And I know there's a bipartisan task force kind of reviewing former President Trump's first assassination attempt, and this bipartisan task force can recommend funds that can go towards the Secret Service to help them, bolster their staff and to get more resources.
All right, Richard, there was much anger over how the Secret Service handled the first shooting. We saw Director Kim Chiefley resign. She's been replaced by the acting director. Now, one Democratic senator has said that people will actually be shocked and appalled when lawmakers release that report that Tiffany was just talking about of the first attempted assassination. But are we likely going to see any heads roll this time around? It's kind of rather tricky because the top brass, so to speak, has already been axed, so to speak, or stepped aside.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen politically here, but it's shocking to me that an assassin could get in the bushes right next to the Trump golf course. I live across the street from the golf course. And I can assure you that if the president of the United States, former president, or a candidate for president were playing golf there would be someone on that road making sure that nobody's getting into the bushes near the golf course. That's just such an obvious tactic that could be used by an assassin. And furthermore, this is a golf course owned by the former president of the United States. So I don't know why that road wasn't being watched, and that man should have been arrested as soon as he tried to enter the bushes. Rather than be fired on when he's pointing a rifle through the fence. The United States spends $900 billion about on our defense budget, almost $1 trillion. I would think we could spend on our Secret Service enough money to protect our democracy from assassins. Once again, a democracy must choose its candidates at the ballot box, and we cannot allow this, and we need to spend whatever it takes to protect our presidential candidates. As well as our presidents.
Let's talk about the political fallout. Now, Tiffany, the first time this happened, we heard how Trump was supposedly a changed man. Many will argue he really did not change. But how much of what we've seen is going to play into voter sentiment is what I'm wondering, especially because early voter ballots are already out. Absentee ballots are now officially available in Alabama. September 19th, in a few days from now, are supposed to be available in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, actually, Allister, how the voter sentiment will be impacted by the second assassination attempt on former President Trump's life. It will remain to be seen. However, voters will be sympathetic to this second attempt, and whether that impacts the way they vote, that's probably question that remains to be seen. But in general, when these types of attempts happen, voters tend to sympathize with the person that was actually attacked, or attempted to be attacked. So I think there could be a bit of a sway towards President Trump, but again, it remains to be seen if that is the case.
Richard, Republicans are already blaming Democrats for the apparent second assassination attempt. For instance, they're saying Trump, they're pointing to Republicans, Democrats saying that Trump will be the next dictator. They're saying that this kind of rhetoric really has to stop. Now, they're saying that it's not surprising that we have this kind of shooting on Trump. So how do you think the Democrats have to play their cards? Because they really have to tiptoe carefully on this one.
Well, in democracies, you do have vigorous political debate and a rhetoric that is sometimes very aggressive. And Donald Trump himself has talked about putting Democrats in prison if he's elected president of the United States. And he's made up stories about Haitian people eating dogs and cats in the middle of Ohio. So, yes, that's going to draw a strong response. And that has absolutely nothing to do with violence of crazy people who get a gun. Nobody would justify political violence. There's no excuse for it anywhere. And we absolutely need to spend more on the Secret Service. And there, yes, I'd fault the Biden administration for not requesting additional funds for the Secret Service. But the idea that, gee, you can't criticize Donald Trump for his conduct in office and for his words because it might inspire some crazy person, I mean, that just makes absolutely no sense. We need to protect our candidates, protect our democracy. And one of the threats to our democracy is from assassins. And the other is from candidates who say that if they gain political office, they're going to put their enemies in prison and who engage in other inflammatory rhetoric. And that does need to be.
Okay, Tiffany, we have just a few minutes left, actually just about 30 seconds. On the flip side, Tiffany, this is for you. How much of the onus is on the Republicans to tone down their divisive rallying cries? Like we just heard Richard there talking about, immigrants eating dogs and other inflammatory remarks.
I do think the Republicans should, choose their words carefully, as they say. Having inflammatory rhetoric serves no good purpose when you're trying to, regain control of Congress and the presidency. I think it's really important and incumbent upon Republicans to talk about the issues that affect the American people every day. And those issues, that rhetoric is not helpful to that message.
Thanks, you. Tiffany. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate your time this morning. In other news now, the FBI is investigating shooting threats sent to Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio. This follows baseless conspiracy theories about Haitian immigrants eating pets. We were just talking about that in our discussion there. The unfounded claims that spread on social media have led to security threats and prompted multiple school evacuations in the city after they were amplified by former President Donald Trump and his 2024 running mate, J.D. Vance, despite local officials saying there are no credible reports of migrants eating pets. Let's now turn to an exclusive interview with Democratic Congressman Bera. NDTV spoke to Bera earlier before Sunday's potential assassination on Donald Trump. We asked Bera about the role of Indian Americans in this year's election. Bera also told us about what Indian food he'd like to cook for Kamala Harris. Here's more on that and other things we talked about. Now, in the recent debate, Congressman Bera, with the recent debate with Vice President Harris, Trump said that she is Biden. That's a view held by many voters who see Kamala Harris as just an extension of the Biden administration. There are those who say that for nearly 4 long years, she had a chance to reach out to the middle class, fix higher prices, tackle the economy, manage illegal border crossings. So that didn't happen. They just don't buy this.
So I think we can be proud of what the Biden administration's been able to accomplish, getting us out of the pandemic, rebuilding America's infrastructure, some of the legislation that we've passed. But at the end of the day, the president is the president and the vice president is the vice president. So it really is the Biden administration. Kamala Harris, and I've known her for a long time, as district attorney in San Francisco, as attorney general in California, as a senator from California, she also has her own priorities and agendas. And again, I think she's starting to lay some of that out. So it also is a new generation. It's a new generation of leadership. So I do expect she'll continue some of the Biden administration's policies, But I also think, just like any new president, she will have her own agenda as well.
But Congressman Bera, people complain that she should be heard more, doing more media interviews. Many want to hear about her policies unscripted and not just at rallies.
Again, this is a campaign that was just set up, a few weeks ago. So yes, I would imagine over the next 4 to 6 weeks, she'll be doing more interviews. She'll be laying out more policy objectives and so forth. But I think, again, people forget how quickly this campaign was set up.
Okay, let's talk about Gaza. It's somewhat unimaginable to think that we are coming up to a year next month, October 7th, since the horrific hostage-taking by Hamas. 40,000 people have died in the Israel-Gaza war since. You have been closely monitoring it as a senior Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. People still continue to die. How is having Harris in the White House really going to change anything?
I think if you listen to how Vice President Harris has talked about the tragedy on October 7th, but also the tragic loss of innocent civilian life after October 7th, I think she, along with President Biden, very much understand the importance of getting a ceasefire, getting the hostages home. I think she'll articulate that maybe slightly differently than President Biden has, but I think from a policy perspective, we want to get that ceasefire and get the hostages returned. But then we want to, as she said in the debate, create a context where the Jewish people in Israel can live safely, but also a context where the Palestinian people can live freely with dignity and peace as well. That's not going to be easy, but again, I think she will work overtime to get us to that ceasefire.
But how frustrated are you with the whole process? It's been so very, very long.
I mean, I'm frustrated as well. And I'd answer that you need both Hamas to come to the table and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I'm frustrated, frankly, with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He should accept the ceasefire deal. We should get a ceasefire. We should get the hostages released. And the fact that, Saudi Arabia, other Arab countries are still at the table, willing to change relations with Israel, recognize Israel, is remarkable. But it starts with a ceasefire and starts with starting to discuss what a two-state solution looks like. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is the one standing in the way of that.
Now, Kamala Harris did not meet the Prime Minister of Israel when he visited the U.S. in July. Given that chill, how would she be able to negotiate if she wins, given that she gave Netanyahu this cold shoulder? Not a good place to really be in.
Well, again, that is Vice President Harris standing up to our desire to find a ceasefire and a peaceful resolution to the crisis in Gaza. If she does have the privilege to be president of the United States, I think she will continue to stand up. And again, as a member of Congress, I think we've done a remarkable job putting a potential ceasefire deal up the table. I've met with the families of hostages. We need to get those hostages released, but we also need to make sure, the senseless violence, the innocent loss of life comes to an end, and we come up with a longer-term solution. And I don't expect Hamas to necessarily be a credible player here, but I do think Prime Minister Netanyahu, for the sake of the Israeli people, needs to understand that it's time for a ceasefire.
Congressman Bera, lots to cover here, so let's look at Ukraine in a bid to end the conflict. And looking at peace talks, Trump's running mate J.D. Vance has talked about a heavily fortified, demilitarized zone at the country's borders. What do you make of that idea?
Well, I think in the debate, Trump was shameful when he was asked directly if he wanted to see Ukraine win this war. We all want to see Ukraine win this war because this was an illegal invasion by Russia of a peaceful country that posed no threat to Russia. So Vladimir Putin chose to invade a peaceful country in Ukraine. We have to do everything we can to get this conflict to an end on terms that are readily acceptable to the people of Ukraine.
Let's talk about a possible government shutdown where parks may be closed and hundreds and thousands of workers may be furloughed. A large number of Republicans are refusing to allow government funding unless the bill includes a requirement that people registering to vote must provide proof of citizenship. How valid an argument is that?
That already is the law. It's illegal for undocumented people to cast votes, and there's no evidence that undocumented people are casting votes. You have to be an American citizen to vote. And again, this is just President Trump doing what he always does, is trying to stir up the water, trying to suppress people from voting. Again, there's no evidence in 2020 that there was an illegal vote, and there's no evidence in 2022, and there's no suggestion that that's going to happen in this election. That's just Donald Trump being Donald Trump.
Congressman Ami Bera there joining us here for that exclusive interview on NDTV. That's it for now on US Election Watch. I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C.
Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the programme tonight, the protesting junior doctors of Kolkata, after two failed attempts at talks with Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, are now in her Kalighat residence for a third round of talks. They've dropped their demand for a live telecast of the meeting, agreeing instead to a signed transcript of all the proceedings. The timing of the meeting is key. It comes just a day before the Supreme Court reviews the CBI's progress in investigations into the rape and murder of a Kolkata doctor at the RG Kaur hospital, which triggered these protests in the first place. Next up on the program, less than 24 hours to go before Arvind Kejriwal, the Delhi Chief Minister, meets the Lieutenant Governor and resigns. So, the Aam Aadmi Party quite clearly set for a churn. Will Kejriwal's gamble pay, or will it be a boomerang? Remember, he does this just days after he left jail after being granted bail by the Supreme Court in the liquor scam. We'll be looking at Kejriwal's decision to quit. Is it a political masterstroke, or did he really have no choice at all? Also, who's going to be the new Chief Minister of Delhi till the elections take place, whenever they do? And finally, a 58-year-old man has been arrested by the police in the United States after he reportedly attempted to shoot Donald Trump. Apparently, this man said in a 2023 interview that he planned to recruit soldiers from Afghanistan through Pakistan who would fight in Ukraine against Russian forces.